What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of the Monday Review Lineup HQ. Resultsdb. We're going through the results from last week. Waste Management Phoenix Open. Got my guy TJL 5124. TJ, what's happening, man?
Tambo, we've got the return of Brooks Koepka. I know that a lot of people, myself included, were taking a little bit of a wait and see approach, and we waited too long. I know people like yourself hit him on that 50-1 outright. So well done and good call on the Koepka win.
Yeah, we're coming off. We're back to back now, right? Because you have Reed, yes, and now I've got Koepka. So tune in to what we're doing. That's what we got going on. I think a lot of people, the entire DFS golf community was in on this at just a blind bet. I said at 50-1. A lot of stuff. The fact was, people, this is a course history course. We saw it with Ricky Fowler, with Hideki back before in their tournaments they've won here. And so maybe like Ricky this week didn't make the cut is a bad example, but I'll just say like Brooks Koepka had won here just in 2015. People say he doesn't win regular season events, if you will. And he went on to win and get the job done. That was a crazy finish to that tournament. Like Xander going in the water was very surprising. You and I talked a little bit before the show about that. It's, guys like him and Finau, I just don't know what it is, but certain things down the stretch. And Xander's a closer more than Finau, but it has been a minute now, and they talked about that. It's got to be weighing on him a little bit. A lot of second places, and that sucks, right? You're there. It's just like us playing these GPPs. You want to get first. It's tough when you come in second. There's sometimes big money involved. If it's 50K versus 10K or something like that, we're going to get into it. But one of those things, man, they'll have to keep working on it. And we'll keep backing these guys. I faded Xander, so my week wasn't great overall. From a DFS perspective, obviously hitting that 50-1 was nice. Nice little Super Bowl last evening, so that was nice as well. I was actually recording the show with Blender for the Super Bowl showdown set when Brooks chipped in that eagle, and I was just like, oh man, this is incredible. Like I actually thought that ticket was dead, and sure enough, it wasn't. So that was awesome to see. So we'll get into it here, guys. We've got this week coming up is the Pebble Beach tournament. I know it's not quite loaded yet. So at the end of the show, we'll talk a little bit about that. But first, we're going to hop in. If you guys haven't been here before, just head it on to rotogrinders.com. You go PGA, Resultsdb, changing the dates to Thursday when the tournament started, clicking contests, and then here's all of your contests available to you. You can hop in. We're going to be looking at the 15, the 555. We're going to look at TJ's, venture into MME and the world of 150 plus lineups, depending on which tournament you're in. So this one, he's maxed out. So at 150 in the $5, we'll look at that. And then we are going to talk some single entry today, maybe get to the 200, but we're also going to talk because I know TJ was in this 555 here. And while it was a max entries of 6, he still approached it as a single entry, which I like doing that as well, especially in the little bit smaller field. It's, you've got one shot at it. There's 20K up top for $555. I think that's a good way to go about it. So definitely going to talk some single entry. We wanted to do that the last couple of weeks, didn't get around to it. I think that'll be helpful for folks, but let's hop right into it. TJ, we'll talk about the flop shot, the 200K to first prize, 58,000 person, large field stuff here. 654, I believe it's Ned Ryerson 05. Looks like took it down. So congrats to them. Just 4 entries. This is a 150 max. You see the WOG show down here. Mendizzle, another guy, 150. Lino coach, he tried to get out of it with 148, thinking we would only look at the 150 maxers, but he still made it up to the top. So he could see that as well. But here's Ned Ryerson's lineup. TJ, talk to me about this. We've got Xander, Sungjae, Brooks Koepka, Benny Yon, JT Poston, and a 1 Matthew Neesmith at 2.49% for 654 points and the $200,000 takedown.
Really solid lineup here. Thought that overall this was a pretty good week to go more stars and scrubsy, which is exactly what we saw here. Thought that a lot of the expensive plays were pretty strong, whether it was Xander or Rahm, or even some Rory and some Justin Thomas. I also thought that there were enough reasonable options in the 6Ks that I was fine sprinkling in a bunch of those. Whereas I felt like in prior weeks, the 6K range was really, really ugly. Thought that there were some decent options that we had this week. So I like how he approached it in that way. Obviously, Koepka coming in 8,800 at only 8% owned and taking down the tournament was a must-have for any win. So great call there with Koepka. And it's one of those that just seems so obvious in hindsight, right? Oh my goodness, Brooks Koepka at 8,800 and 8%. Like, why aren't we playing that? And that's coming from someone who X'd out Brooks Koepka from my player pool. So yeah, it's hard to find that balance of, hey, I want to wait and see when, until somebody shows me they get back into form, versus when it's someone like Brooks, they could go from just being horrible for 2 months straight and then come out and win on any given time. So like that lineup here, nice construction in terms of the ownership, in terms of 111K, 19K, 18K, then dipping down into some value from there. Very nicely put together.
Yeah, I like that lineup quite a bit. It's kind of like what you said, though, too. It's, there's different things you have to get over, whether they're phobias or whatever you want to call them. But it's like, the wait and see approach is one of them for sure. 8,800 Brooks on any given week, like I said, at 50-1. That's why I bet him. Just seems insane. So it's like, but then I understand why that too is a lot of people bet him and didn't play him because they're just like, you know what? If he wins, I'll take my 50-1 and I'll be happy. Other camps look at it from the side of, well, if his ownership is low, then I'm not just going to bet him. I'm going to also play him. This was me because I'm going to benefit both sides of the, if someone's going to be, I use this with Will Zalatoris. I X'd him out. Yeah, he had an okay week, but not the best of what he'd seen lately. But I didn't like his ownership in that range and how many people were on him when you had guys like Brooks just below him for lower owned. So I said, I actually thought that Will Zalatoris would be a better guy to just bet, but not play, because you could just, if he did something or won, you could get a top 10 bet in on him. It's whatever you wanted to do to try and get some payoff there if it happened. But there was a lot of opportunity, to be able to pivot off him in DFS and play other guys. Like a guy like Brooks Koepka is just huge. And look at that, 146.5 points he puts up, a couple Eagles on Sunday. That was just awesome. Even the chip in on 17 or whatever it was there. But I was going to say, I was the same way with Xander. So it's different. It wasn't like a wait and see. Xander's incredible. We know this. He's a great golfer, doesn't make very many mistakes, wins tournaments or has in the past, comes second quite a bit. That's sort of the running thing now with him and the joke of Xander Finau, like they're the same guy. But Xander's been a closer in the past. He's won the Tour Championship. He's won some big events, expected to win a major at some point, more than like with Tony, we're saying with Finau, when will he win again? We're saying like, when will Xander take down a major? That's more what we're talking about. And with Xander at 11K was the challenge for me. You've got guys up there, Rory, Rahm, JT. It was like just tough for me to get to Xander when you have those guys around him. And in the end, he proved me wrong and did his thing. So that's why it would have been tough for me to get onto this when I clicked off of Xander. But yeah, Im was a little bit interesting, standout. He just seems to keep showing up. And so whatever the price is, just ignore it and just play the guy, right? And play the man here. And that's what I think about that. Benny on only 68. Had some swings up and down, but he still made it in here. And then Poston and Neesmith were two guys at the lower end. I like Neesmith a little bit come Wednesday. I really wasn't feeling Poston for like a 20 under type event. I just thought, he'd done it at the Windham, but I thought, maybe there was other guys down there and still put up 109. So that's nice. Shout out to Will Brinson. I don't know if you follow him on Twitter, but Will Brinson's a good follow. Does a lot of stuff for NFL, likes golf quite a bit, and have chatted with him in the past, and he's basically just all in on this stuff. He likes it. He's in on DFS, and he won himself 80,000. So 3 lineups only. Shout out to Will. This lineup was more something I could have got to, TJ. JT, Scotty Scheffler, Brooks Koepka, Sam Burns, whatever. I was okay. I liked him a little bit. And then Tringali and Neesmith. This was basically, if you like Neesmith, all those other guys. I think you were on most of these guys too. What were your thoughts on this lineup? Just quick.
Yep. Completely agree. This one, definitely one that I could have seen myself pulling together. I said that I was not on Brooks, but I was on everyone else and was not on Neesmith either. Can also see that maybe he's kicking himself for not using that extra 200 to go from JT to Xander. But hey, that's what happens.
Yeah, that is true. Actually, what was the difference there? 100, and yeah, that's the win. So that happens. But, thinking from a lineup construction perspective, and that's what we're here to talk about, is I do like it because basically what he went in on was, instead of fading the 10K range, he said, I'm going to fade all the 11K guys, right? The two, and I'll just go with JT here instead of, what was it? Rahm and Xander was 11 and 11 too, I think. So it's, I'm going to skip those guys and start at JT, which I like this because we talked a little, you weren't on with me, but it was, I think, Noto this week or Cards. And we talked about the Lineup HQ show on Wednesday about how the win equity was all in the top. And you and I have talked about, when we previewed last week, when we did the preview for the Waste Management Phoenix Open on this very show, we said, look at all these guys at the top, man. Like those are all the guys that are likely to win this tournament. And in the end, it was Brooks. But if you look at, you still wanted these guys in there. They were all up there, and, 100 points here, 126 with Xander. I don't know if we'll find a Rahm, but he was up there for most of the tournament. So it's just to show you, him and Rory were Rory made a huge run on Sunday and went, crazy. That imagine if he just shows up for one other round, he probably wins this thing. So it just goes to show, right? That's where it is. The win equity, you got to get a little bit different, but I do like all it really says to me. And we're going to talk later in depth about your single entry strategy. but like Brooks and Neesmith were really the two plays you said you weren't on them. And that's what would make this, a good single entry lineup as well. It worked out everywhere, but he just, JT Scheffler, Scheffler wasn't super popular, but these are guys people could be on and see winning. Burns and Tringali were popular enough for their price, but not over popular. And then you just picking in two other guys in Brooks and Neesmith that does the trick. And still, disappointed, like you said, probably they didn't get the full win, but 80,000 is not a bad week, right? So we'll take that one. Let's move on. We'll go to the 555, have a quick look at this one. Obviously takes much lesser of a score. If you look here, it was 654, took down the flop shot, only 593. And KR O'Brien gets there on 9 entries. Talk to me about this one. So we got Xander, Brooks, a little bit different though at the bottom. Harman, Homa, Burns, and Ryder to round it out.
Yep. Similar start in that the Xander Brooks combo. Obviously that just completely crushed this weekend. And then I like the high 7K, low 8K values there in Burns, Homa, Harman, all people that I was personally on this week and interested there. And then you've got the one-off of Sam Ryder down at 6,500. Again, just thought that it was a good week to go with that stars and scrubs bills, and then just take some dart throws on those 6K guys and hope that you hit the right ones. So we saw it in the previous ones with Neesmith, see the same thing here with Ryder at the same price, scoring. That seems like the big difference between what we saw, the 593 here and then the 650 ranges. What did Neesmith had 100 something, right? Versus 71 for Sam Ryder.
Yeah, Neesmith was 112.
Yeah. So 40-point difference right there. But that again, with only 601 entries, didn't even need those extra 41 points to take it down.
Yeah, that's the key, right? We talk about this all the time, and this will come into play when we talk about the single entry strategy, when we get to it in a bit here, is mainly that you can still utilize that in something like this. We've talked all last season about trying to find a way to get into some satellites to find your way into one of these tournaments, because this can be the life changer or the big victory, breakthrough, whatever you want to call it, to get you to that next level. And I think the thing about this one that stands out is something that we saw on the Wednesday show, and you and I have talked about this the last couple of weeks, but they skipped the 10 and the 9K range, which automatically forces a different build. So back to even Will's lineup that we looked at, it could have been whatever. He used JT and Brooks, but just using, the way it was set up, that was only 200, so that still worked. But what we noticed on Wednesday looking at it was that the $7,500 range was getting peppered with love because of the build setup. Everyone was using the build setup that was landing in the $7,500 range. So whether it was 73 up to 76, that range was getting utilized. And when you build this way, you can see it was natural to put the extra 8K guy in there. We talked about, we couldn't even find a lineup, TJ, where it was using one 8K guy. That was how crazy it was. So we were setting up rules. It was Cards and I, and we were setting up rules like, what if we force 2 8K guys? What would that do? But that was just what we were trying to show you. And that's where this all comes together, is that's what we're looking at on the Wednesday show to tie back in with this show to say what worked out. And that was a prime example, was we were forcing 2 8K guys in to make these different lineups where you'd have a spot where you actually wouldn't end up in that middle range, because you get a 6K guy and 2 high 7s with an 8, right? And then Brooks or whoever your other guy, certain guys were on Bubba or Ricky or whoever else in here. They didn't all work out. My point is more of the construction factor. So it seems like even more so than what we looked at last season, where we were talking a lot about, the 2 guys in the 20, the 2 guys in the teens, and then the 2 lows. It seems more like the ranges are mattering more. TJ, any thoughts on that versus, the overall ownership perspective?
Yeah, it does seem like in terms of the ranges, that the salary ranges that you're targeting seem to be a common theme here. And like you've talked about, getting away from the chalkier build, right? Of, okay, a lot of people are going to play either Xander or Rahm. And then from there, they're naturally going to go to a 9K guy. They're going to play Zalatoris or one of those guys. And then from there, you're just going to fall in that kind of 7,500 average salary range. And rather than just peppering, 7,300, 7,400, 7,500, I like this. I will dip down to 6,500 with one, and then give yourself room to go. Instead of playing those 7,300 guys, you're getting the 77, 79, 8,000 that maybe are a little bit of a different and unique structure compared to what the rest of the field is doing. So I think that's definitely something that is important to think about and to try to get unique, not just in the players that you use, but in the actual construction of the lineup and how it all fits together.
Yeah, I like that. I also like thinking of it. I know we're talking about single entry here, but 3 max as well. I like that situation of, okay, this is what I do weekly. And sometimes I do it at the top with 2 guys. Like, is it, Rom and Rory, or is it JT and X? Like, who do I play? And they might both fit. That's a 2v2. But I like doing it in something like this. And when we get to single entry, this will come up again. But if I've got two $7,700 guys in my lineup to round it out, and there's no 6K guy, that might be where I start. Okay, I'm skipping that range. But then what happens when I move from a 77 to a 65 and a 77 to an 89? Does that change? That changes your build quite a bit. And that's the single entry aspect of, maybe that's the single entry because that's going to be the lesser likely owned lineup or build style, regardless of the chalk or what your draft percentages are that we're talking about here of what each guy is. You're on a different build type. And that's kind of what I'm looking at for single entry. And even for 3 max, you then play them both. And then maybe your third one is you swap a guy at the top and go away from Xander this time to JT, and then see how that fits. And maybe 89 goes to 91, and that leaves you out of the 8K range in the third one. And now you've got 3 different types covered. Other, camps will take the play of, I'm going to play, just switch 2 guys, and don't care about those build structures. And I want to have a chance to get to the top. But I like doing it that way personally, TJ, just so you can get a little bit of a mix. And then you also sort of see what looks better on paper. And that helps you, for me anyway, decide on my single entry. So we'll go to that in a minute. Let's first go quickly here into your venture. So you text me on Saturday, we don't, show these screenshots off, but you're feeling good because it looks decent. And we're not trying to get any early, screenshots out there. We're just saying, like, it looked good. Here's where we're at. Might be good discussion on Monday. It turns out because Brooks was X'd out and came sort of back from the dead, if you will, down 5 to win the tournament. It's definitely possible at this tournament at the Waste Management Phoenix Open in Arizona, but and he did it, but I'm saying, like, that was not expected. So you were thinking on Saturday, it was looking really good, man. I saw it, but what was the final results here? How did it end out?
Yeah, final results was not great. Ended up with I think I got back like $550 out of 750. So small loss overall. But yeah, Saturday was sitting pretty. I was in like 3rd, 6th, and a couple others in the top 50, I think. And then, I had no Brooks.
Big time.
Yeah,
but
had no Brooks. I had Brooks. Keegan in all those lineups, and he kind of fell off. Mm-hmm. So the core of my lineups that were doing well were like, they had Xander, they had Keegan, they had Scheffler, and then just sprinkled in a couple of other guys. But you can see that those aren't even the lineups that ended up being my best because they just fell apart over the weekend. Now, I've been through golf plenty of times to know that just because you're doing well going into Saturday does not mean anything because there's so much golf left to play. However, I do know that anytime that you're sitting with a good amount of 6 of 6s, you feel good about your chances. And to me, it's all about how many times can I get to Saturday when I'm in a good spot and then just be well positioned for the weekend to go well. Didn't work out this time, but I felt pretty okay about the process overall.
I was just going to say, I think the process is really good. We'll go to it in a second to look at your pool, but just how bunched up it is tells you the same thing. Like you said, first off, you got a bunch of 6 out of 6s, which is awesome. You can only put yourself in the position to get lucky. We've had this conversation many a time. And so I think that's important to remember. The other thing is, like you said, just the tilt factor. Like, I know you're not sweating it. That's what you were just saying. Like, looks good. Like, we'll see what happens. Who cares? We know it can go awry in a heartbeat, and it did, but that's okay. But I think the thing is, like, you see so many times. So Henley goes on that run on Saturday, and I got people texting me, buddies, like, oh, no Henley, no money. And I'm like, guys, it's like 1 front 9. Like, it's not over here yet. Like, we have is Henley winning this tournament? I don't think so. So we'll wait and see. And you never know, but I guess that's sort of the thought process, right? Is everyone just tilts everything so quickly in these tournaments, and just so many things can happen down the stretch. So we'll go to your pool here. This is what I wanted to look at. I think it's, again, back to, looks like you stuck with sort of the same structure we looked at last week, where you've got, the strong, conviction on enough guys, but then look at all the green. Like, you have leverage on pretty much everyone up here until you get to Webb Simpson. So just talk us through your process again here. For those that missed it last week, TJ went through this already, but I like hearing it again and just showing sort of maybe what, like, who and why and what you did and how you got to this point.
Yep. So was clearly high on Rahm this week. I wanted to pick one of the top end guys to get double the field on, whether it would be Rahm or Xander or JT. And I felt best about Rahm. So I wanted to go overweight on him starting there. And then with Zalatoris, kind of similar to what you said, I was I was either on like a double the field or completely fade him kind of thing. Decided to go the double the field route. And you'll actually see, and double the field on Corey Connors too. You'll actually see that in my single entry, I had all 3 of them in that as well. So I do like to, I play a pretty high variance style just in terms of like picking the guys that I like. And I use the same core both in my single entry as I did in my MME pool. Again, that's just the way I like to approach it, but I have a pretty strong stomach for the swings at this point. I know that that's not the greatest for everyone. And then from there, just trying to get, again, you can kind of see that there's some people that like Berger. I was like, I want to be right around the field on Berger, but then some I tried to pretty consciously make sure I got around double the field, whether it's Hideki, Benon, Burns, Tringali, those kinds of things. That's really what my focus has been, is kind of looking at someone, looking at their ownership projection and deciding, is this someone I want to be overweight, underweight on, or even with the field. I don't go even with too many people, but I think with like Xander and a couple of those, there's some people I'm just like, I don't want to fade them, and I'm comfortable just going with the field and seeing where it goes from there.
I think Berger was the best example of that here. Like you said, he's 23, you got 25. It's like you didn't want to be out, but you didn't want to go all in either. And I think the other point, to the counterpoint to that, you said it great, was with Zalatoris. So that to me was the play. This was the play right here, was either you're in on him, so double the field, or you're out. I don't really like a guy like him where you're middling on it, because it's just like he's either doing it or he's not. And that's the way I am with certain players as well. So I like seeing that. That was a good one. I like that you took a stand on the top. I think this is definitely a good approach. I also like that you talked about, again, it's high variance, but if it pays off, why would you, some people want hedge life. I get it. So in their single entry, they might say, okay, I'm not going to play any of these 3 guys, but then you're looking to middle yourself a lot or break even a lot versus, ever having the chance to go over the top. Because if these guys all hit and you had this much conviction to put 150 lineups in with all of them, why, there's clearly conviction there. Why not be in on that on single entry and just have those weeks where you lose? If they all suck, that you lose, but if they all hit, it really pays off, right? And can pay off big. So I also like this too. Like if you look at just the overall player pool, there's no name on here that stands out to me like, oh, like that was a little bit aggressive. Like these are all like everyone could say what they want, like Jason Day, but 7,800, that's a play for me. Like that's, again, $7,800 for a guy. And you actually didn't have a bad week. I think he'll be more popular this week for Pebble Beach. Same with the situation. Like, let me ask you this. This is a good segue to, we'll go to single entry in a second, like I keep talking about, but for the Pebble Beach situation, DJ this week, he's 12K for Pebble Beach. He's just coming off a win. I know there could be jet lag. I'm sure there'll be different storylines out there and narratives that people try and create, us being guys that talk in the industry about it. We'll come up with something, right? But the thought process to me is like, we don't see 12K very often. We certainly do not see 4-1 Vegas odds on a golfer very often in a tournament, like even anything with the field like this. And so do you, like, if he's 30% owned, do you bump it up to 60 this week if you're in? I'm not saying you have to commit to this right now. I'm just curious of the 40 versus 20 on Rahm, call it. Would you be 60 now this week because it's a guy like DJ and he gets up to 30%? Do you now have to go double still, or would you be fine with just going 40 again?
Yeah, my guess and my view is that I will either try to go double or fade on something like the DJ play. And I think that's the right way to approach it. And that might sound crazy, right? Of like, well, how can it either be nothing or all in? Like, how can it not be in the middle? And to me, it's just understanding that, golf is it's a game of range of outcomes. And in the event that he does really well, you want to be overexposed to the field. And in the event that he doesn't, I want to be under it. So it may sound like it doesn't make sense, but I think it's the right way to approach it. So yeah, someone like a DJ this week, imagine the ownership is definitely going to come in high. We'll see how prohibitive that 12K price tag is when we start building lineups, but PGA is also not the sport to be super price sensitive on, right? It's not like NBA where the difference between, $800 is a big point per dollar decision. This is, he's either going to do it or he's not, whether he's 12K or 11K or 13K. If he blows out the field, he blows out the field, and you're going to have him.
That's my thoughts. And I think that's another interesting conversation piece. Just quick, I'll get your thoughts here. But the thing about it is like, you'll hear it all week. Like people will laugh when the ownership comes out and the tournament locks and they see that like 35% of the people play DJ, even though they knew he was going to be 35%. they'll say like, that's the worst game theory move of all time. Like you played 35% DJ when you knew that was going to be his ownership. Like it's golf. Anything can happen. The minute he fails, those lineups are dead, blah, 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 blah. But what are your thoughts on that? Because we've had a little bit of a conversation about this in the past, and maybe he should be 50. Maybe he should be 60. Maybe that's way underweight. And maybe he should actually be 16K in this field. And he's only, you know what I mean? There's a lot of different ways you could look at this to say that the 35% ownership that locks on Thursday morning is bad and actually should be 60%. So what is that why, or what are your thoughts against that conversation piece of that's just terrible game theory by playing him when you know he's going to be that high owned?
Yeah, I think that it could very well be that, yeah, he's 35% and he's still under owned. Mm-hmm. Like, again, I haven't looked too much into this pricing, but it seems like a pretty weak field overall. And so anytime you get that crazy separation, like the Bryson at the Rocket Mortgage from last year scenario, right? Where it's just, there's one guy that's clearly head and shoulders above the rest of the field. And my point is just, if you think you're going to have him to win, then you're going to want to get overweight no matter what that ownership is. And it's very possible that 35% at the end of the day is under owned, right? And my guess, again, if it trends in this direction, is that in like the small field, high entry stuff, you might see like a 50, 60% DJ,
right? Like
we saw at the Masters. Obviously different price points. He was underpriced at the Masters, but we've seen it before, and the guy's just been unbelievable. So there's no reason to think that he's going to fail, honestly. And again, he could come in the top. He doesn't need to win. I think that's also a misconception, right? If you're like, well, if I'm playing a 35% DJ at 12K, then he needs to get first. Like he could still get top 5 and score enough DraftKings points to be in the winning lineup, especially if it's a no-namer down the board that wins it, right? Would you agree with that too, that you don't need DJ to win or get second in order for him to be in the winning lineup?
I've spoke on this and made mistakes on this in the past. That's what this is all about, especially this show is learning and getting better. I'm glad you brought up the Bryson at Rocket Mortgage. You know, I was off him that week, and that was a leak. That was a mistake. Like the thought process afterwards and looking back, again, that's you win or they say you win or you don't win or lose, you win or learn. And I certainly learned something that week was with that many scoring opportunities with a guy that was just that much head and shoulders above the field. He didn't even need to win. He was going to score. There was going to be eagles. There was going to be birdies. There was going to be so much happening at that price point. I don't even think he was 12K that week, but my point was more of you probably should have just locked him in and taken what you got. And that's where I'm thinking about it here too, is this is where, like I say, like you mentioned earlier, you can't really go field on DJ. For me, I get that there's like a risk appetite out there and things that you don't want to do, but I don't really want to go field with them because there's already going to be enough DJ lineups out there. 35% of the field, we're calling it as of Monday morning. It could be higher, it could be lower, but like you said, the factor of that then, brings in that, okay, now how do you get different with a DJ lineup? So that's what we need to see. We haven't gotten into the pricing yet, but I think it's a good conversation piece, especially when we're about to get into single entry, because you can still play DJ in single entry this week. And this is a good segue to it. My point is back to my previous conversation of I'll put the two $7,700 guys and then I'll split them. And then I'll split something else. Then I'll split and do 2v2s. I want to have a bunch of those. The only way to have a bunch of those is to go like 75% on DJ. Or 60% or more on DJ to be able to find these different builds and different styles where I could be the right DJ at the top of the tournament. And then, like you said, if he comes top 5, that could be a Saturday lead where he's just destroying everybody and crushing it and scoring, falls back a little bit on the front 9 and a slow start on Sunday, and then battles his way back to a second place or a third place and doesn't quite come through. But all that scoring still goes there with it, and he'll be in the winning lineup at that point. It doesn't necessarily need to be a first place. So definitely agree with you on that. Good little segue over to this. Let's talk about this, TJ. I thought that was a good tie-in because single entry is a big deal for people. We play the $200 single entry every week is awesome. I don't know if we'll get to it here, but it's 150K guaranteed prize pool, 30K to first, 834. So less than 1,000 people, $200. It's a decision to be made. I get some people would rather play, but think about it like this. What I was going to say is you want to play more multi-entry, a couple 3 max, and then maybe one smaller single entry. But that's the point. You can apply these same theories we're about to talk to the $50 single entry or to the $75 single entry, or even less, $12 single entry. It's just, remember, you're going up against a bigger field. This is sort of the idea here where we're talking about it against the 200, because this could be where you turn your same $200 budget into 30K one week and then be able to grind up from there. So We'll talk about it in the sense of your lineup though, TJ, because you played the 555. This was a 6 max, I believe. Yeah, 6 max. Crank it up. RG member played 6 and came in second. Congrats to them. Foxy 39 took this thing down. 571. You'll see we go even lower with the score required. So Xander Brooks, don't need to go through this. We've seen the same thing, the same theme. Sam Burns pretty much in all of them. Connors in quite a few. And then it was just who you played at the bottom. This case was Windham, and Joel Damon didn't even make the cut. So, a 5 out of 6 won this tournament this week. And that just goes to show if you can get your bankroll up and get into these tournaments, you can still get there, because other one, look at this, another 5 out of 6 with Burgers. So talk to us about your lineup. You had a 9th place finish here for $2,000, which is awesome. 4x your money. Rahm, Zalatoris, Connors, those 3 guys you mentioned earlier. And then, man, like you had a nice little lineup here, 6 out of 6 and 5 out of 6s are winning it. So yeah, talk to me about this lineup and just your overall thought process on single entry and why it might be different and the way you think of it.
Yep. Yeah. So first thing is what I do is pretty much every week I make one lineup that I consider to be my main lineup, and then I'll put it in the same lineup in a number of different tournaments. So you just talked about the $200 single entry, had this same lineup in there as well. I think I was like 42nd or something in that tournament. So you can just see right off the bat, right, the differences in an 800 field tournament versus 200, 42nd place versus 9th. So again, just that field size first and foremost. And yeah, I mean, I was just 1 or 2 pivots away, right? Like Xander over Rahm or Brooks over Zalatoris. And then I'm probably winning if I had to guess, right? So,
you win if you have Brooks over
and
Zalatoris.
Like I don't know if maybe in hindsight this lineup is a little bit too on the chalky side with the 3 guys over 20%. I wasn't sure that Connors was going to be that high owned, honestly. Although people in the higher stakes love Corey Connors. Mm-hmm. Like I'm sure Empire Maker played him. I think he plays Corey Connors every week. Yeah, see, he always plays Corey Connors. I think people that look at some of the projections, he's always popping. But yeah, in general, so my thought process, I talked about Rahm, Zalatoris, and Corey Connors earlier. They were 3 of my favorite plays that I thought would be a little bit chalky, but wasn't sure exactly how. So yeah, had them in my single entry as well as at the top of my MME pool. And then from there, I wanted to make sure that I at least had some differentiation if I knew that the 3 of those guys were going to be on the chalkier side. So that's where Sam Burns, I definitely liked the value there. Early in the week, I thought that he was going to be chalky, but then as the week was going on, I felt like he was flying under the radar a little bit more than I was expecting. So I was pretty comfortable he wasn't going to be in that 20% range. Was happy to see him at 12%. Thought that I was really happy to see him at 12% for sure. And then Tringali is always one of my boys, even though he had awful course history here. For me with course history, I feel like and maybe this is not the proper way to think about it, but I don't look at course history for starters. I look at the play in general and what I think about the play in a vacuum. If I like that, then I'll look at course history. And a lot of the times, if I like a play, if I see that the course history is bad, I'm like, I don't let that. That won't get me off of somebody unless I was really teetering on the edge. But then if I'm on the edge for someone and I see that they have really positive course history, that's when I definitely like to factor that in. So essentially a long way of saying I don't like to fade guys just because of course history. I just think it's a little bit random. So I was comfortable going with Tringali there. And then that last spot, I was really between Grillo, Luke List, and Benny An. And I was pretty confident that Grillo was going to be the lowest owned of those 3 guys. And that's why I chose to go there, because if I played like Luke List and Luke List comes in at 15%, then it's just way too chalky of a lineup. And I knew for sure that Grillo was going to be, in that 5-6% range, and just felt that, I guess if you look at the lineup, it's a lot of ball strikers, right? That's usually my you got Connors, Grillo, Zalatoris, ball strikers that sometimes struggle with the putter. But was
and you put them all together. I was just going to say that's kind of the funny part is like, Grillo, Tringali, Burns, Connors, Zalatoris. These are all guys that are great ball strikers. Rahm is Rahm. That's the obvious one. But the fact of putting them all together. Sometimes on the Wednesday show, we talk about splitting these guys up and maybe not risking it with all these guys because of the sweat equity and how tough it is. But this gave you a good ride because you get to sweat all these 4-footers. It's like a lot more sweat action for you in that sense. But I like what you said, and a couple other things just to show people, like you said, not only did you use the guys at the top, so Rahm, Zalatoris, Connors were your 3 highest owned, the only guys you picked up in multi-entry over 30%. But if you go down here and where was Burns at? Got them all on the screen. If you look here, you've got Burns, way overweight. He was in your lineup. You got Connors, I believe, somewhere here.
Yep. I was overweight all of them, I think.
35 on 16. And then if you look at Grillo, 13 on 5. Like all these guys that you were in on over here. And then even Tringali, I believe, 20 over 7. So I like what you did and how you sort of talked through it. You said like you went back and looked, you just knew in the Grillo spot, it would have been 1.5 more points if you took a Luke List, but you knew the ownership was going to be there with it. And then it just gets a little too aggressive. If you had have set our rule up and not let a third guy be over 20% here, you might have had Brooks in there and won the tournament. So trust your boy. The next time I'll trust you on Tringali. You trust me on Brooks. So dang, this thing would have been a winner, but still nice work. And I think that's good to look at for folks looking at it. As far as, everything else, we sort of talked through it, but like no 8K range, no 10K range. So I thought that was still, again, you're looking at ranges and picking between them. And then you really only had the one guy in the hot range of where people were using them. And you made sure that was the range you chose the lower owned guy. So whether that was on purpose or not, we'll say it was. I think that's a good call and something to look at is like, look, if I am going to end somewhere in the range where everybody else is going to, I'm going to try and make it a leverage spot where I can be different. And if those guys are a couple of the chalk pieces in there fail, that can be my one up. And then I'm okay to get a little bit chalkier with some of the guys that I think are just the best plays of the week. Hence why I'm all in, not all in, but I'm 40% and 35% in on these guys over here. So it all makes sense. It all adds up. I think that will be helpful for people just to think about and look at and just apply those things. As far as the $200 single entry goes, just moving it over and finalizing out here, we don't have the pricing loaded in yet for the Pebble Beach, so we won't go there this week, but Suburbs one took it down with 600, and you can just see it again, the sort of the style of the build. To me, don't got to go through it too much, TJ. I just think the fact of the matter is, look, Xander, no Brooks, which was interesting, but just goes to show again with single entry, smaller field, higher dollar. Sometimes you don't need that. But again, 11K, 9K, 8K, stayed away from that middle 7K range by putting in a Stricker at 6,300. Again, maybe it's not exciting, but if you're looking at it from this perspective, this just goes to show to me, and then I'll let you get us out as far as what you think. But Steve Stricker is a cut maker that obviously had a much better week than you expected. Hence why no one was really on him at 0.72%, but 6 out of 6 is all it took to win this tournament. And by that, I mean, you didn't have the person who won, Suburbs won, congrats to them. They didn't have the $8,800 Brooks with 146.5 points. And the second place didn't have him. Third place had Brooks. So that just goes to show how important in this is the 6 out of 6 versus having the winner on your lineup. So any final thoughts on this one before we get out of here, TJ?
Yeah, nice contrarian build structure overall. I like that Ortiz pivot off of like a Burns or a Connors, getting him at lower ownership there. And I think that was a nice pivot spot in that range because, yeah, like you said, we had Burns, we had Connors. I feel like there were 4 or 5 guys in that 7,700 to 7,900 range, and Ortiz was probably 5th or 6th on that list. But the breakdown of this expected ownership versus the range of outcomes, Ortiz can certainly outperform them. So I think that was a pretty sharp pivot there. And we saw Sung J M show up in previous winners too. And yeah, the Stricker play that was definitely not on my radar. But like you said, hey, last guy in, cut maker, don't need him to go crazy. Although he did go crazy this week without a doubt as far as Stricker is concerned.
Yeah, and I think one last thing for me, just that you said, and then we'll get out of here, is that our Ortiz was still a great play in that range, still 10%, not like under-owned, but just the other guys were over, sort of more owned in that range. So that was a good way to go about it. And that's sort of what they did everywhere. They didn't have to just like force anything in ownership. It was just like, okay, if everyone's going to play a $6,200 and a $6,100 Nick Hardy and Davis Riley, I'm going to play the wily vet here in Steve Stricker that, can show up any week and just make a cut for me. Everyone's hoping on these new guys to come out, and they actually had some good weeks. Riley and Hardy. I'm just saying, but that was another thing to look at from build structure. Anyone who was dipping down here, was going with the guys from that lower end range. Windham Clark, again, sort of a lower owned piece, but still enough conversation to say, like, obviously he's a pretty good play, but is he the best to everyone? No. So I'll just play him. Ortiz over the Connors and the Burns, like you said, Horschel over some of the guys like Ricky and Watson. So just really went with good plays in every range that just sort of fit together and got unique that way. And that's what it took to take down the 30K. That's going to be it for this week, I think. TJ, let the people know where they can find you and then everything you've got going on this week upcoming.
Yep. You guys can find me on Twitter at TJL5124DFS. We'll continue putting out the value plays article every Tuesday. I've also got some other stuff going on with NBA Top Shots for anyone that is interested at all in that. We have some podcasts and some stuff coming off in that space. And yeah, let's see if we can nail a winner for the third week in a row here, Tambo, between the two of us. We're on a little heater.
Want to get after it. Let's get another one, man. I appreciate it. You guys can find me on Twitter at ToeTagginTambo. Hit me up there if you guys have any questions. You know what's coming out this week. Tuesday show, Fantasy Golf Degenerates podcast. Wednesday lineup HQ. Got a lot going on. So check everything out here at Rotogrinders. Other than that, thank you and good luck.